Hello there fellow humans and welcome to how to equip your tank, if it's any tank. How to equip every single tank in WoT Blitz. Let's go, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe even become a member. Now, we'll go into it, start off with the upgrades. Always use your free XP to upgrade gun and turret. Don't use your free XP to research a new tank. Because for example, if you play the T20 and then you try to research the Pershing, you use free XP for the Pershing, now you have a tier 7 at tier 8 because the Pershing is going to be stock. So you always want to be using your free XP on the guns, on the turrets, but mainly obviously the guns to get that upgrade in first, and then you can upgrade the rest as well. So, because obviously you want to have a good gun. Then, consumables, I would always recommend multi-kit and repair kit. The third slot is, depending on you, adrenaline or engine power boost. On an autoloader, you can only use the engine boost, so you put that in. And on other tanks, you can choose. I always pick the adrenaline because it just gives you more firepower, which is very nice. I would not use both because why would you do that? You know, you can get tracked. If you lose a crew member and then you get tracked, you're done. So you want to have that safety, you want to have that thing to fall back on. And because boosting your tank's ability should primarily come through the crew skills and then provisions and equipment, not through the consumables. So always use the multi-kit and the repair kit and then whatever. Provisions, I just use the first three, you know, food, protective kit, and the fuel. That's pretty much standard for all tanks. If you can afford it. If not, this is probably the one thing that I would cut out on. Because while they do give you a pretty nice bonus, they're not necessary. Ammo. It's also a very interesting and very important topic. It's quite easy. This is a normal setup, you know, more than half of standard ammunition, then some APCR and a bit of HE. Now, this depends whether you have bad AP penetration. If your AP is really bad, you might want to use a bit more of that and a less premium res AP ammunition. Or if it's a heavy tank, for example, you have to fight mouses in your 100s, you might want to be using a bit more premium ammo, but you never really want to use the same amount of premium and the standard. So that's pretty bad. Then we have the HE. Interesting topic because you have tanks like the FE422, the Centurion 7.1, which do have HESH, and if you do have HESH, you want to load a lot of it. Same if you have HEP on, for example, a IU-251 like this, then you also might want to load quite a couple of those. But obviously the penetration's bad, so we load some heat and some HEP as well. So we have the nice penetration. That's how I do it. That's not that hard. And then we go into all the equipment slots, and 3 of them are basically fixed, except for one tank. Toolbox, always use the toolbox. Then, consumable delivery system. You can use them more often, obviously, as you are using 2 non-time sensitive consumables right here. You know, these 2. The high-end consumables are fairly useless. So, consumable delivery system, engine accelerator, except for when the tank is very fast in a straight line, but very bad at turning. I'm looking at you, 113. That is the only point where I would use the improved control. In every other case, always engine accelerator, and obviously the toolbox is an absolute must-have here because the enhanced tracks are just shit. Obviously, we're gonna go through the easier ones first, and then we're also gonna go through the optics and the camonet, which is also fairly simple. Always use the optics unless you are a paper tank destroyer that's camping at the back of the map. If you plan on camping, optics probably aren't being the greatest. You know, if you're like a Borsig, then the camonet can be a better option. In terms of camo, try just use it. You know, just use it unless you're really broke, unless you really can't afford it. Then don't. But most of the time, just put a camo on your tank. You look better, and you'll also be a bit more safe. So just put a camo on. But most of the time, I would just use the optics because you can see more. And Blitz is a very small, very confined game. So most of the time, you're gonna get spotted anyway, and people are gonna know where you are. So it is more useful to also know where they are rather than trying to hide from something that you can't really hide from, because Blitz is a very small game, and if you can't hide without the camonet, you probably won't be able to hide with it either. So I would just go for the optics. Unless you really like to camp at the back, then the camo can be a decent option. Now, we got the specialization done. Then, in terms of the vitality, because, I mean, the combat power, that's the interesting section. The specialization, I would just put these three, and then the toolbox, and then the improved assembly as well. Now, the only time the enhanced armor actually makes sense if you have a very well-angled tank that already has good armor. You know, because there you'll be improving the angles quite a lot, like an i7, for example, or any of those pike nose vehicles. There, the enhanced armor can be very useful. Most of the time, 4% more armor isn't going to do you that much. But the hit points, the more armor you have, the more hit points you tend to have as well. So, if you have better armor, you know, already get better hit points from the improved assembly. And if you don't have any armor, then the enhanced armor is not going to give you any benefits whatsoever. So, in most cases, I would opt for the improved assembly. In some special cases, like an i7, I would go for the enhanced armor. Also, if you're a hull-down vehicle, like, I don't know, maybe an M48 pattern, something like that, you could consider trying to use the enhanced armor. But most of the time, I would just opt for the improved assembly. Be safe with it. Because, obviously, this is a review for, like, everyone, not just for the top players, because you want to be able to set up every tank, right? Not just specifics. Obviously, if you're a very good player and if you're trying to do like, if you're trying to go from 3,000 to 3,100 average damage, you can fiddle around with this a lot more and try different setups. But in this video, I just want to give a general overview of what is generally the better option. I mean, obviously, the best thing to do is just to get good at the game, but that does take a lot of time. But you want to be correctly equipped as well, and you also might want to improve your modules, maybe. Now, I would recommend the improved modules for vehicles that are good at ramming, A50M, MX50B, for example, at T10, and I would also recommend the improved modules for tanks that have very weak ammo racks or fuel tanks, like the FE215B, like the 60TP. In general, it doesn't really matter which one of these two you take. It just depends which one do you want to protect more. Your track, a fuel tank, an ammo rack, or your crew and your engine. So it doesn't really matter which one you take because both give you about the same level of protection for just different things. I do prefer the improved modules, you know, better track health and stuff like that. And because you have the two repair kits, you don't really have to worry about it that much. Especially also if you have a good crew. We're going to talk about the crew at the end because this is quite a big thing. So we're going to go into that last. Then, we got that done. So, pick whichever one floats your boat, except in a few cases that I just mentioned, where the improved modules is the better one. Then, refined gun or vertical stabilizer? Well, that's quite an interesting question. It's not that hard, actually. The further you go to the back, the more refined gun makes sense. The worse accuracy you have, the more refined gun makes sense. Same goes for the supercharger and the enhanced gun laying drive. Basically, if you're camping, there's basically a camp setup and then there's non-camp setup most of the time because wargaming. I did prefer the old equipment system as well, don't worry. For the veterans out there. But yeah, fun gun for tank throwers, absolutely. For heavy tanks that are slow, the vertical stabilizer probably isn't going to disturb the movement that much. So if you're very inaccurate, go for the refined gun. If you're a medium tank basically, I would just pick the vertical stabilizer on any medium tank. Because, you know, you want to maybe try to shoot on the move, you want to be mobile, you want to be useful. Same goes for light tanks. Except for a dirt one like the T49, but even there, it doesn't really matter which one you use because, you know, it's actually going to be bad anyway. So you might as well try to enhance your speed shooting ability a bit more. So basically, here, if you're playing slow, if you're playing further back, you go for the refined gun. If you're playing fast, if you're playing forward, then you go on for the vertical stabilizer. And the same goes for the enhanced gun laying drive and the supercharger. Here I would use the enhanced gun laying drive on basically any tank. The supercharger is only really effective when you're playing from the back. And then the supercharger does have a problem. The penetration decrease with distance, for example, isn't effective for heat shells because heat always keeps its penetration, but it is also the slowest shell. APCR is the fastest shell, but loses the most penetration over distance. So I would only reuse this supercharger if either you have very good heat rounds that need a bit more speed, or you have APCR rounds that you want to fire a very long distance. Otherwise, gun rating drive is the way to go. And then we get to the age-old question, calibrated or gun rammer. Well, the question here for autoloaders is clear. On autoloaders, always use the calibrated. Same goes for derp guns, Smasher, KV2, big guns, you know. Also a gun like the Borsig, where it has heat, where it has HE, you get more HE penetration, and you get also better increase in your heat. We would also opt for calibrated if you already have high DPM, like a T10 medium tank, but you have quite lacking penetration. You have heat as premium ammo, so you get quite a big penetration boost there. So calibrated is very useful here as well. And then if you have horrible DPM and horrible penetration, I would opt to up the penetration, because then the few shots that you have can be penned just a bit easier, because there's not much that you can do there. But most of the time, I do default to the gun rammer because I just like to have more shots. But if you're an inexperienced player, if you're a new player, if you're not that good of a player, I would definitely try to use calibrated on pretty much any tank. And then maybe later try to figure out whether the gun rammer gives you an advantage or a disadvantage. But first, I would start off, use the calibrated, you know, you have less shots, but you have high likelihood of penetrating them. Then, once you're good enough with that tank, you can consider switching to the gun rammer. And that's how I would do it. And now let's go into the crew, which is very complicated at first, but it's, I guess, not that hard once you kind of know it. Obviously, all of them are useful in some form or another. What I would do first, if you start with the game, you try to train everything to level 2. And you have a solid baseline on all of these. And from there, what you want to prioritize is the repairs. Obviously, repairs is very important if you play heavy tanks. That is insanely important right here. What you also want to have is the mentor, because that allows you to train all the others a lot faster. And maybe you also want to either have clutch braking or smooth turn. More likely clutch braking, because they can turn a lot faster. And then we go back to the improved control thing. You know, that's why you don't need improved control to train the clutch braking. And the camouflage, you know, can be useful if you play paper tank destroyers, if you like to camp in the back. Otherwise, there's not much point to it. And in terms of light tanks, you want to have the precision fire, because it is a great perk. And yeah, I can definitely go for that. This soft recoil, only get it when you're playing autoloaders. If you are playing autoloaders, then train this one especially. And this one, it's mostly a heavy tank perk, but anyway, I don't know why it's in the light tanks, but here we are. So yeah, and this is one that you want to have if you fire a lot of move. But in general, all of them are important, so try to get all of them to level 2 first, and after that, prioritize the repairs and the mentor and the clutch braking, and after that, just train up whatever. So that is it for today. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you learned something. If you have any ideas, you know, if I did something wrong, you know, put it in the comments. Obviously, that's always welcome. And yeah, see you for the next one. Goodbye.